In this video, I'm going to run through the top 5 most common questions that Meijer asks in their interviews, and I'm going to help you plan brilliant answers that will get you a job working at Meijer. So let's start with a question that comes up in every single Meijer interview, and that is simply, what times can you work at Meijer? And if you don't plan and prepare for this question, you can lose the whole interview here. A lot of people mess this up. I'm going to show you how to answer this correctly and score highly on it. So a few things you've got to get in your answer. So you have to show that you are flexible. You want to show off as much flexibility as you possibly can. You also want to show them that you are someone who can be relied on, that when they need staff at a particular time, you are going to be someone that is likely to be able to help out when they need staffing. And really, you're trying to show a can-do attitude. When they're asking you about times, you want to say yes to as much as possible. Every time you say no, your chances of getting the job goes down. Remember that. And fundamentally, they want someone who is committed to the job, that takes their job at Meijer very seriously. If you are giving a long list of lots of times you can't work, which is what a lot of people do for this question, they say, I can't work these times, but I can do other times. That sets the interview up very negatively and puts them off hiring you. They would rather hire someone who's going to be there when they need people than someone who has a big list of times that they can't do. The other clever trick to be successful is to think about the key times that Meijer needs staff and basically volunteer and say the times that they are very interested in getting people in. So they are looking out for people who can work at the store opening, so earlier in the morning, people who can work on weekends. If you're happy to work school holidays, that is a really great time to mention because it's a slightly harder time to staff the store. Some Meijer stores are open 24 hours a day. So being able to work very late and perhaps overnight and night shifts, that's a good thing to volunteer for because that's, of course, a slightly harder time to staff. If you're happy to work at short notice, definitely mention that. If you are willing to just jump and go to work at short notice, mention that. And a good phrase you can use to show lots of flexibility when you're summing up your answer to this question is to say that you are happy to work to meet business needs. That's quite a reassuring phrase that says, basically, I'm willing to work around what the business requires. And so if you stick to what's on this slide, you are likely to be successful. And so we can move on to another question that is extremely important, which is, what can you tell me about Meijer? Obviously, there is absolutely no point going to your Meijer interview without having done your preparation. You need to really know this company inside out before you even think about going to your interview. Otherwise, you're setting yourself up for failure. So I'm going to run through some key facts that you need to know and show you how you approach this question. So when you're answering this question, you want to start by saying the things that everyone knows, the obvious facts about Meijer. It's a grocery chain that sells general merchandise as well. It's a retailer, that sort of level of obvious. Show that you know the basics. Then move out and say some things that only some people would know. Only people who really knew the business would know certain things about it. And then expand further and try and say one or two facts that perhaps not even the interviewer knows. And so you're going to really stand out and impress them. So let's run through the key facts that you need to know for the interview. So the Meijer business is based around supercenters. These are much larger than average supermarkets. And they also expand into selling general merchandise as well. That's why we call them supercenters. They're not just a supermarket, they're supercenters that have got general merchandise as well. They are predominantly based in Michigan and across the Midwest. Supermarkets tend to have territories, and this is their spot. They're not spread out over the whole United States. They're focused in a particular area. They are generally, for most stores, open 24 hours, 364 days a year, with Christmas Day being their only day where they're not in operation. They were founded in 1934. That is a good number to memorize. And another name that you should memorize is Heinrich Meijer, who is the original founder of the company. The company is, of course, family owned by the Meijer family, and many of the family members are involved in the running of the business. They are the top bosses in the business. They were actually the very first supercenter in the United States. They predated Walmart. They are the leaders and the original innovators in this space. They are also known for very distinctive architecture. A lot of their stores have very interesting designs. That is a staple of the Meijer brand. They have a lot of restaurants and cafes, some deals with McDonald's and Starbucks that add to their whole store offering. And they have a chain of gas stations as well. They're quite a wide, diversified business that offers lots of services around their core stores. And lastly, my top tip for preparing is to visit the Meijer newsroom. So if you go onto their website, they've got a thing called the newsroom, and you'll get the latest stories and news about the company, and you can bring some of that up in your interview to show that you've done your research. And probably, if it's very new, the manager that's interviewing you may not even know that themselves. So let's move on and look at another question that comes up, which is how would you deal with a disagreement with a team member? This question often comes up, but you can also get questions around disagreements with a manager or dealing with angry and aggressive customers, for example. And you can answer all of these questions with the same basic procedure. So you can adapt this answer to lots of different questions that could come up. And there's 4 things you want to get in any of these sort of answers. And firstly, when you're dealing with disagreements with team members, you always want to say that disagreements are to be avoided and that you always try to maintain good relationships with everyone. That good relationships are a very important part of successful working. The second thing you need to do is in any question where they are bringing your professionalism into question, where they're giving you a situation that you could make the wrong choice, you always want to emphasize that you always behave as a professional and that you are a representative of the Meijer brand. And you're always conscious of that. The other thing that you can get in there is that you are solutions focused and customer centric. That means that you are always focusing on solving problems. When there's a disagreement, you want that disagreement to be resolved. You want things to get back to normal and the disagreement not to have any impact on the customers. The customers are at the heart of everything you do, and that disagreements could have a negative effect on customer service, and it's part of your job to minimize and eliminate that. So if you get those 4 ideas in, you'll be successful on any question about disagreements or negative customer interactions. Now we're going to move on and look at a common question which will be asking you about your strengths and your weaknesses. We're going to look first at strengths. So when you're answering the question about your strengths, you have to start with a genuine strength. It's a strength that you really have, and it has to be a strength that's actually a really strong strength. Then you need to prepare good evidence. You have to come with some sort of evidence that backs up that strength. That could be a reference from a previous manager, could be some examples of when you've used this strength, or it could be some qualification that backs up this strength with evidence. And really, you want something that's going to have a positive impact on Meijer. It's got to really help their business. And I'll give you some ideas of some strengths you could talk about. And I'm going to show you how you can structure an answer to the question about what your greatest strength is. So the way that you answer it is you start by saying a major strength that I have developed is, then supply your evidence. This strength is evidenced by. Do something to back up that strength. The best one is to get a reference from a manager you've worked with in the past and basically say, this isn't just what I think. Somebody else agrees with me that this is a strength. It makes your answer so much more powerful. And then lastly, you want to do some work for them. Explain that this strength is useful to Meijer because. Why should the company actually care about your strength? How is your strength going to make their business better? And if you get those 3 ideas in, you're going to have a good strength that you can back up with evidence so they're going to believe you, and you're going to show them how it actually helps their business. So some key ideas you may want to consider as your strengths. If you've got any experience working with customers in another role successfully, that is some great strengths to use. Reliability is really important. They want people who are reliable. Not all employees in grocery are reliable. So if you've got evidence of reliability, that's going to go a long way. If you're proactive and friendly, there are some other really good strengths that you can use. So let's move on and look at weaknesses. And this question can absolutely ruin a whole interview. So be very careful on this question. So you want to start with an actual weakness. Don't pick something that's not really a weakness and try and spin it as one. So you don't want to say things like, I'm a complete perfectionist. That will not be taken seriously. The second thing you need to do when you're asked about your greatest weakness is talk about fixing it. Don't talk about why this weakness is a big problem. Talk about the things that you're going to do to fix it and overcome it. But most importantly, make sure it's something that Meijer just does not care about. If you pick something that's really important to the job, you're giving them a reason not to hire you. And a lot of people mess this question up by doing just that. So if you were to say something like, I am known for my extremely offensive body odor, your interview is probably just going to end there and they are not going to hire you. So when you're answering this question, there's a certain formula that you can follow. And I'm going to give you some ideas of some weaknesses that you can give as well. So when you answer it, simply say, A weakness that I'm aware of is, say your weakness, don't talk about your weakness very much. Immediately go on and say, I've been working on this by, and think about some ways that you could overcome that weakness. You want to talk about overcoming it more than you talk about what your weakness actually is. Some ideas of things that can be used as weaknesses is saying that you can only speak English. The reason being that most people who are applying for a job have that as a weakness as well. So it won't cut your chances of getting a job there, because for a lot of people, it'll just be assumed, perhaps unfairly. Unless you're applying to a store in a high Spanish speaking area, that's not likely to have a hugely negative impact on your chances. You could also talk about math, spelling, and public speaking, because these are things that, unless you're applying for a management job, you are very unlikely to ever have to do, and they are genuine weaknesses, and they're ones where it's very easy to do something about. So choose one of those weaknesses, or think up another one that fits the criteria of not being important to Meijers business, and that will help you get through and survive this question. So let's move on and look at the general way that you can answer another question that comes up, which is describe a time when you ... I've left this very open-ended, so you can use this procedure to answer actually any question that comes up around describe a time when you whatever. And I'll give you some examples that you need to prepare. And the way that you answer any describe a time when you type questions is with the STAR technique. Situation, task, action, result. Situation. What was the situation that you had to do something in? This is the time you're describing. Your task is what did you have to achieve. Your action is what did you actually do. And the result is what happened. And the result's got to be a positive result. I'm going to run through a good example that was given by Steve Wynn, who's the founder of Wynn Resorts, as an example of unbelievably good customer service. And it just shows you how that procedure works. So the situation in this case was a customer at the hotel forgot their medicine. Simple statement that just says, this is what happened. This is the situation I found myself in. The task was to get their medicine to them so they don't have to leave the hotel and ruin their holiday. So the task is just saying, what do you need to do about this? The action is what you actually did. So in this example, they organized the medicine to be picked up and delivered the next day. So they're very clearly saying, this is what I did in order to resolve this situation. And then the result is what actually happened. What was good about this? And so in this case, the couple were extremely happy and didn't have to cancel their holiday and go home. So there is an example of how you set out a describe a time when you type question. Start by saying what the situation is, say what the task was, what did you have to actually achieve, what did you do, what was the result, and make sure you pick an example that has a really great positive result. And for Meijer interviews, you want to plan examples of integrity. So when you did the right thing, when there was the option of doing the wrong thing, but you chose to do the right thing, for example, catching someone stealing and doing the right thing of reporting that, for example, when you've provided great customer service in the past, or where you've received great customer service, and a good example of when you've worked in a team really well. So this will help you plan for any describe a time when you questions that could come up. Lastly, as a bonus, I want to take you through some questions that you can ask them at the end of your interview. So definitely start by asking what the next steps in their hiring process is. Make sure that you're actually enthusiastic about knowing whether you've been successful and you care about getting this job. Ask them what they like about working at Meijer. Why do they really like working here? And share in their enthusiasm. Ask them what you can do to prepare for starting at the company. What should you be doing right now to be super well prepared for day one? And you can also ask them how they think about their perfect employee. And then you can engage in a conversation around how what you've said previously and your personality and your skills actually match what they are looking for. And it's quite a nice way to end the interview. And lastly, one question you have to make up on the day. You have to be listening all the time to what they're saying. Listen very carefully, and when they say something you wonder about, take a mental note and ask that at the end. So I hope that this video has been helpful to you, and I wish you the best of luck in your Meijer interview. Thank you very much for watching.